Hello and welcome to 7 Days of Halloween. Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome to my 7 Days of Halloween series. Over the next 7 days, I'm going to be creating 7 cards using some new stamp sets from the Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous collection, along with some older sets that I've had through the years. I'm also going to be sharing with you some other stamp sets that I have in my collection. One of the new stamp sets that I picked up this year was the zombies, and I wanted to share with you a way to create a Halloween card using not only your new stamp set, but also one of your old ones. The older set that I'm going to be using today in conjunction with my zombie stamp set is the Time Traveler set, and I've had this set in my collection for a while. I'm also going to be using some background stamps from Stampendous. So to begin, I wanted to age my cardstock just a little bit. So I used my antique linen distress oxide and I smeared it on my craft mat. And then I took my distress sprayer and I sprayed that to create some droplets. Then I took my heavy cardstock and I dipped it into the ink. Now I didn't want to have full coverage over my card. I just wanted to create it so it wasn't so white. I just wanted it to be a little bit dingy and a little bit grungy. But I didn't want the background to the colors of my distress oxides to overtake my background. And that's why I only used the one color. It was intentional. I'm going to be stamping with a couple of stamp sets, and I'm also going to be doing some layering where I'm going to mask some of the images. So I wanted my background to be nice and dry. The idea behind this card is to create a traveling zombie. So I wanted to have some sort of a businessman dressed in a nice suit, but with a zombie face. So that's really what I'm going for here. So let's see if I can pull it off. Now, once my background was dry, I decided to add a little bit more controlled coverage. So I am still using my antique linen, but this time I'm using my blending tool. And once I have a nice amount of coverage, I'm going to go ahead and use my stamping platform, my MISTI essentially, and I'm going to lay out the stamps that I'm going to be using. Now, whenever you're masking your stamps, you have to kind of pre-plan your layout. You have to decide what stamp you want to have in the foreground, and then you're going to mask that so that way you can stamp your other stamps and they won't cover your main focal point. In this particular situation, I wanted my traveler to be my focal, but I also didn't want to use that face. Remember, I'm creating a traveling zombie, so I have to mask off the face, but still get a nice crisp image of the suit. Now, the Post-it note that I'm using today to mask my face is a Post-it note that is sticky for most of the background. So just the top part doesn't have any adhesive, and it's really great for masking. It will stay on my paper and it won't move at all. Now, because I'm essentially masking something that hasn't been stamped yet, I'm going to have to take really care when I add my Post-it paper over the face. So after I fussy cut it, I'm going to actually adhere it to my stamp. Now, I know I could have easily just been really careful in stamping to not get any ink on the face, but I didn't want to take any chance of getting the traveler's face connected to my zombie face. I wanted to have a real nice plain background in order to add my zombie. So I just took some of my adhesive and I added it to the top part of my Post-it, and then I stuck that to my stamp. And then I went ahead and added the ink to the bottom portion of my traveler to stamp my cardstock. So after I stamped my time traveler, it was time to add my suitcase. Now this was a really easy mask. I really didn't need to even fussy cut anything. All I had to do was use the corner of my Post-it to cover part of his suit, and then I stamped my suitcase. When I pull the Post-it note off, you're going to see that there is a little bit of the background that didn't quite stamp, but I'm going to easily be able to color this in to finish off the suitcases, and you'll see that when I start coloring my image. All right, so now that I have my background and my foreground stamped, it's time to add my zombie face. Now, as you can see, I did a pretty good job at masking the face because my zombie face fits perfectly. What I really liked about this zombie stamp set is the zombie faces came in different sizes. So depending on the body that you're using, you could easily create all sorts of cards using this technique. My time traveler was a little bit larger, so I wanted to make sure that I had a good zombie face that was proportionate to the body, and I think I did a pretty good job in picking out the right zombie face. So once I had my background and my foreground stamped, I did add some clear embossing powder to my ink, and then I used my heat embossing tool to dry the embossing powder. I plan on doing some Copic coloring, and for some reason this is just a habit and something that I like to do. I always like to add clear embossing powder to my images before I use my Copic colors, and this is a really good way to make sure that my ink doesn't run or bleed. So I'm going to go ahead and put on some music while I color up this zombie and the background, and then I'll be back at the end of the video to put the card together. Okay, now that I have my zombie and my background suitcases all colored, it's time to turn this card into a traveling card. I know the suitcases do kind of hint to the theme, but I really wanted to add some more traveling stamps. So I pulled out one of my older stamp sets from the Tim Holtz collection, and I decided to add some train stamps to the background just to create more of a traveling theme. Now, when I pulled out these stamps, I wasn't really sure exactly of the layout. I knew I wanted it to definitely be a train theme, but I wasn't sure how I was going to lay the stamps out. So whenever I am putting together a scene, I just simply take out my stamp sets or my stamped images, and I just kind of lay them all around the card until I get the look that I like. Now, as you can see, I was definitely going to use the railroad crossing sign. But one thing you'll notice after the card is finished is I actually ended up stamping the cross up and down rather than side to side. So rather than it be your typical cross, your railroad crossing sign, it is going to look like a cross that you might see in a church. But that's all right. It's little imperfections. I'm not sure if anybody would have really noticed unless I actually pointed it out. So once I decided on the layout, I did ink up my stamps, and I stamped it using my black archival ink. If you've watched my other videos, you know this is my black ink that is my go-to ink, and I use it for most all of my stamping. I do plan on investing on some other colors because I really like the archival ink, and I need to probably venture out and do a little bit more than black ink. Now at this point, I wanted to add a sentiment, so I did go back to my zombie stamp set to pick out one of the fun little sentiments. And the sentiment that I ended up choosing read, "Always be yourself unless you can be a zombie." Now at this point, all of my black stamping was finished, but I still wanted to make it a little bit more gory. After all, it is a Halloween card. So this is where I decided to use my grungy stamps from Stampendous. Now, before I started the card, I knew that I was going to use these grunge stamps for my background. And that really is one of the reasons why I didn't put too much distress ink on the background, because I wanted to stamp this grunge stamp after I had my images stamped. And I know I could easily do this because of the way that the stamp fits into my hand. I could just hold it on my fingers and just stamp on the white part of the card. And as you can see, this is a really easy stamp. Even though I already have my image colored, I wasn't too concerned about getting of that red ink on my image. I figured if I did get some of that red ink on my image, it would just add to the overall blood look of my zombie. So at this point, the top of my card is complete, and all I needed to do was mat it onto some cardstock and then put it onto my card base. Now at this point, you probably would think that my card is complete, but don't go away because I'm going to show you how I completed the inside. Now my original idea for this traveling zombie was to put him on a passport card or a passport book. But he was just a little bit too big to fit on that, and that's why I decided to go for a 5x7 card. But I still wanted to use some of the fun ephemera that I use in my passport cards, so that's where I had the idea to finish off the inside of the card. Now recently I've been creating some of my own digital images, and I've been listing them in my Etsy shop. I really wanted to create some ephemera for some zombie cards, and that's where I had the idea to create some tickets. I sized up my zombie tickets to fit perfectly in my Sizzix ticket booth die set. And then I'm using my pocket die to be able to house my ephemera. If you are interested in these digital images to use for your cards, I will have a link listed below for my Etsy shop. I also have several other printables that I would love for you to check out to use in your crafting. Now I will be doing a drawing at the end of my series, and I'm going to be giving away one of the stamp sets that I used this week. I'm not going to tell you which ones, you're going to have to just be surprised. In order to qualify for my drawing, you do have to be a subscriber to my channel, and you have to leave a comment on every single one of my videos this week. As I indicated before, I will leave a list of all the products that I've used to create this card along with the links to the stores. If you've enjoyed the video, I would sure appreciate a thumbs up, and feel free to share my videos as well. This is a series and I would love to have lots of viewers. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed my very first card for my 7 days of Halloween, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks for stopping by.